Hey everybody, it's Stigvet, your friendly neighborhood veteran, and this is part 17 of the Warriors Reflection series. My dreams would be dark and frightening. Let me tell you about the scariest story I've ever been told. I was working at a vet center with Readjustment Counseling Services, RCS, which is a great program, by the way. They are everywhere in the nation. They provide free counseling for all combat vets and active duty. Also, DoD and VA do not have access to vet center records, so it's a safe place for pilots and those with a security clearance to receive counseling without fear of jeopardizing their career. Anyway, I was recently back from my own military deployment as a trauma counselor, and even though they hired me, my boss was worried about me taking on patients of my own generation. So the first 40 veterans that I got were Vietnam and Korean War veterans. The center was getting a lot of new, older generation vets coming in. Most of them had recently been diagnosed with cancer, Agent Orange, or some similar life-ending diagnosis. Their doctor would, as standard practice, offer them counseling, and if they refused, like most do, they would pitch the vet center as an option. And the idea of talking to another veteran rather than some civilian doctor was what changed their mind. I became the first person these veterans had ever talked to about war. As I listened to each of these old veterans describe at that time the last 50 to 60 years of torment they suffered after war, all the nightmares, relationship problems, anger and rage, fights and jail time, drugs and alcohol, sobriety and redemption, I felt honored to listen to these epic stories of men and women who lived full lives while simultaneously and secretly fighting an internal war with their demons from war. It's how each and every story ended that shook me to my core. In the end of their life summary, I had my list of problems that they could work on, all the options for treatment plans, and they had to pick their starting point, and I would ask them, of all the issues they face, what's the one thing you want to heal? And they would consistently say the same answer. I want the nightmares to end. As a young veteran at the time, my heart sank every time I heard this answer. 32 veterans, I started keeping track, in a row before I got an answer that was different to that question. 50 years of nightmares. I was horrified that I could be facing a life in which the nightmares I was having then would never go away. I'd assumed the nightmares would just diminish over time, even if it took years. And for some of those veterans, that happened, and then they came back with a vengeance after just being faded away for maybe a decade. I couldn't be more wrong. They all had tried drinking alcohol because heavy drinking will inhibit the dreaming process. They all described a fear to go to sleep. Not that they had to face nightmares on a nightly basis. They weren't every single night, but many nights. And when they happened, they were intense. They lived with a fear that each night could be another torturous experience. We learned from another counselor who specialized in dream therapy, and I was able to guide them through the treatment while starting to do some of the work myself. Over a couple of years, I saw these elder veterans cleanse and heal to the point that they could sleep peacefully. And after I hung up my hat as a counselor and put on my hat as stick vet, I started my own path of cleansing and growth, and I truly dedicated myself until I could let go of my own nightmares. Cleansing. The first minutes of the day and the last minutes of the day are cascading moments. Your habits in those time periods will affect the following hours afterwards. Dream therapy has to start with a healthy bedtime routine and proper sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is the term to search if you need a list of habits in creating a healthy bedtime routine. Things like low lighting, clean environment, no eating in the last hours, no stimulants, chill music, or white noise. Then a big part of dream therapy is a dream journal. The journal itself needs to be next to or in your bed with a pin attached or clipped on. The last thing you do before you fall asleep is write, and the first thing when you wake up is write. Before you get up at all, you need to write or the dream will fade. Writing not just what happened, but how you felt. It's important to look at your dream as a lesson being taught. You need to take notes and study in order to understand. After this habit is established, you gain a bit of control. You can force yourself to have a certain dream. You can recognize that you're getting into a nightmare and stop it, or wake yourself up, or change it into a different dream. After establishing good discipline, you can even research and develop lucid dreaming skills. That's where this path could lead, but the goal is just to diminish nightmares. Then there are reoccurring nightmares. Either a specific event experienced being played or replayed, or a certain nightmare of your mind's creation. These are different. I don't even see them as nightmares. I believe these are the result of our attachment to a demon we carry since that trauma. I've also seen that these nightmares are often seasonal or occur with increased frequency during a certain part of the year. This could be an anniversary time, when on the anniversary of a trauma, the mind remembers and starts having these reoccurrent nightmares more often. In war, we do not take the time to mourn the losses or process the trauma, and it lingers as unfinished damage to our spirit and comes out in the form of a nightmare. Sticks and stones. I was doing dream journaling consistently for almost like a year when I noticed a reoccurring nightmare resurfacing with increased frequency. Because that's what dream journaling does, is you're able to look at the big picture of what's happening over time. Start treating your dreams like a scientific experiment and studying them. It was a pretty horrible nightmare. It was my own son being burned in front of me, and I was helpless to do anything. I brought this information to my counselor, that all of a sudden it's happening and frequently. And through her questioning, found out it was associated with a trauma that I experienced in war, when a school bus was hit by a bomb and the medics were patching up burned children. I was just a gopher, getting gauze and such for the medics, and at one point locked eyes with a little burned boy, and time froze. I probably paused momentarily, staring at him. Maybe just a second in reality, but the look in his eyes burned into my mind as clear and as powerful as the memory of my own son's birth. I saw the connection. I realized what it all meant, and I needed to do something about it. That night, I had the reoccurrent nightmare, and I woke up and walked outside, fresh air. I picked up a rock and I carried it as I went for a walk, thinking of that burned boy instead of thinking of my son. I put that rock on my bedside table. I remember later my son screaming, and when I looked at him for a fleeting moment, I saw the burned boy. And first I did the dad thing, and then I walked outside, picked up a rock, thinking about him. And I put it in my pocket as if to say, I'll talk to you later. Rock after rock piled up on my bedside table over the following weeks. The nightmare changed, and the boy in the dream was no longer my son. And things changed so it was closer to the actual past event. I took a day to go into nature where nobody could bother me. I brought the pile of rocks, placed them in a circle in front of me. It was very easy to imagine the boy sitting there. And we had a conversation. There were things I needed to say. There were things I needed to listen to. And of course I cried. And I scattered the stones as if scattering ashes of a fallen loved one. It wasn't just mourning the little boy that burned long ago. I needed to mourn my broken heart. That last piece of my innocence shattering, and that loss of my past self. The man who I was. That's who died that day. The recurrent nightmare completely disappeared. The burned boy is still a demon that I carry, but I'm dominant in my relationships with my demons. And when I get visions of him, I know what it means. And it doesn't bother me. Sometimes during that time of year, I carry a rock for a day or two. Have a short moment with him. Because dominance over your demons is not about caging or controlling aspects of yourself. That it's about having a healthy relationship with all aspects of who you are. The light, the dark. This is Stick Vet signing off. Sweet dreams.